this episode, we focus on explainability, because AI is often trusted too quickly when it sounds confident and dismissed too quickly when people cannot understand it. Explainability is the practice of making AI-driven decisions understandable enough that leaders can approve their use and auditors can evaluate whether risk is being managed responsibly. New learners sometimes assume explainability means you must open the model and read its internal logic like a textbook, but that is not the real goal. The real goal is to produce a clear, defensible story about what the system does, why it produced a particular output, what information influenced that output, and what controls prevent unacceptable outcomes. When that story exists, the organization can use AI without gambling its reputation on mystery. When that story is missing, even a technically strong system can become unacceptable because no one can justify trusting it. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. Explainability begins with a simple idea. People need reasons they can evaluate, not just answers they can repeat. A decision is defensible when a reasonable person can follow the logic, see what evidence was used, and understand the limits of certainty. With AI, the danger is that outputs can look like reasons even when they are just fluent text that hides uncertainty. Explainability helps prevent that by requiring the system to show its basis, such as the sources of information it relied on, the assumptions it made, and the boundaries it respected. For leaders, defensibility is about business risk, because leaders must justify why the organization used the system and why the risk trade-offs were acceptable. For auditors, defensibility is about control alignment, because auditors need to see that the organization's claims about oversight and safety match reality. Explainability is the bridge that turns AI from a black box into a governable system component. A beginner-friendly way to understand explainability is to separate explanation of process from explanation of output. Explanation of process answers how the system is designed to behave, including what data it can access, what constraints apply, and what review steps exist. Explanation of output answers why a particular response or recommendation was produced in a specific moment. Both are needed because leaders care about the process, while investigators and auditors often care about specific outcomes. If you can only explain the process but not specific outputs, you will struggle during incidents and audits. If you can explain specific outputs but not the overall process, you will struggle to show consistent governance. Explainability, therefore, includes documentation, monitoring, and evidence, not just clever wording. The most defensible systems are those where explanations are repeatable and grounded in recorded facts rather than in human memory. Explainable artificial intelligence, XAI, is a term you will hear in this space, and it helps capture the idea that some models and systems are designed to be more interpretable than others. After this first mention, we will refer to it as XAI. XAI does not mean the model reveals every internal calculation. Instead, it means the system provides understandable signals about why an output occurred and what influenced it. For some use cases, explanations may come from the model itself, such as a structured rationale that references key factors. For other use cases, explanations come from the surrounding system, such as showing which documents were retrieved, what rules were applied, and what thresholds triggered escalation. Beginners should avoid the misconception that explainability is always perfect or always complete. The goal is practical explainability that matches risk, so high-impact decisions get stronger explanation and low-impact tasks get simpler explanation. A major reason explainability matters is that AI outputs can feel persuasive even when they are wrong, which is a unique kind of risk. A system that confidently generates an incorrect explanation can cause users to accept falsehoods because the explanation sounds reasonable. This is why explainability must be designed to reduce overconfidence rather than increase it. Defensible explanation often includes clear statements of uncertainty, clear boundaries on what the system can and cannot know, and clear separation between observed facts and inferred conclusions. For leaders, this reduces the chance that decisions are justified with invented reasoning that cannot be verified. For auditors, It reduces the chance that the organization is making claims it cannot support. In practice, defensibility means the explanation should point to evidence that can be checked, not to vague language that feels reassuring. When explanation encourages verification, it supports safe decision-making instead of creating a false sense of certainty. Explainability is also essential because many AI systems are not standalone. They are part of a pipeline that includes data retrieval, transformations, and downstream actions. If a system uses retrieval, an output may be shaped by which documents were retrieved, how they were ranked, and what context was included. If the retrieval step is misconfigured or permissions are weak, the model might surface restricted information or base its answer on inappropriate sources. Defensible explanation therefore often includes showing what information the system pulled and why it pulled it, because that is the most checkable part of the system's behavior. This does not require exposing sensitive documents to everyone. It requires that authorized reviewers can trace the chain of influence. Beginners should see this as a key shift. You may not be able to fully interpret the model's internal reasoning, but you can often interpret the inputs and constraints that shape the outcome. That traceability is what makes decisions defensible. Another part of explainability is being explicit about what the output is being used for, because use determines how strict your explanation must be. If the output is a draft that a human edits, a high-level rationale and a reminder to verify may be sufficient. If the output guides customer communications, you need clearer sourcing and clearer boundaries to avoid misinformation. If the output influences approvals, access decisions, or financial outcomes, you need a stronger explanation that can be reviewed later and defended under scrutiny. Beginners sometimes treat all outputs the same, but defensibility is not one-size-fits-all. A system can be acceptable for low-stakes assistance and unacceptable for high-stakes decisions if explainability is weak. That is not hypocrisy, it is risk management. Strong oversight uses explainability to decide where AI should be used, how it should be used, and what protections must be present before reliance increases. Explainability also supports audits because audits often focus on consistency and control effectiveness. Auditors want to know whether the organization applies the same rules each time and whether exceptions are handled predictably. If an AI system sometimes allows sensitive data to appear in outputs and sometimes blocks it, auditors will ask why. If the organization claims that high-risk outputs are reviewed by humans, auditors will ask for evidence that reviews occurred and were effective. Explainability helps here by creating records that show what happened, such as which policies were applied, which reviewer approved, and what data influenced the output. This is not about making the auditor happy. It is about proving that the organization can govern the system under real conditions. Beginners should understand that audit defensibility is often about showing the organization has control of the process, not about claiming the model is flawless. A defensible system is one whose behavior and oversight can be demonstrated, even when mistakes occur. Leaders care about explainability for a different but related reason, which is decision accountability. Leaders must decide whether to approve AI use, how widely to deploy it, and what risks are acceptable. They need explanations that translate technical behavior into business-relevant terms, like what data is touched, what harms are prevented, and what incident response looks like. Leaders also need to understand the limits, such as where the system is known to be unreliable or where outputs require review. If leaders cannot get clear explanations, they may either block valuable innovation or approve risky systems blindly, and both outcomes are harmful. Explainability gives leaders the ability to ask and answer practical questions without relying on deep technical knowledge. Beginners should see this as part of professional responsibility. Technical teams must communicate system behavior in defensible terms, and explainability is the tool that makes that communication grounded rather than rhetorical. A common beginner misunderstanding is equating explainability with a story the model tells about itself. Models can generate plausible rationales that sound convincing but are not faithful to the true causes of the output. This creates a risk where the explanation becomes a performance instead of a reliable account. Defensible explainability avoids relying solely on generated rationales and instead emphasizes verifiable artifacts, such as the retrieved sources, the policy checks applied, the user permissions involved, and the version of the model and prompts used. When explanations are grounded in such artifacts, they can be audited and compared over time. This also supports incident investigation because responders can see whether a surprising output was caused by a model update, a data change, or unusual user behavior. Beginners should remember that an explanation is only as good as its connection to reality. If it cannot be checked, it cannot be defended under pressure. Explainability also improves safety because it helps teams detect and correct failure patterns. If you can see which inputs and data sources lead to unsafe outputs, you can adjust controls where they matter most. If you can see that certain user roles are producing risky prompts, you can add guidance, restrictions, or oversight for those contexts. If you can see that a specific model version increased unsafe behavior, you can roll back and revise validation criteria. Without explainability, teams often rely on anecdotal complaints and guesswork, which leads to slow and inconsistent improvements. With explainability, you can treat safety as an engineering discipline with evidence-based iteration. Beginners should notice how this ties back to governance. Governance is not just approving systems, it is maintaining systems, and maintenance depends on understanding. Explainability is therefore both a control and a learning mechanism. Another way explainability helps without slowing the business is by enabling smarter oversight. When explanations are clear and structured, reviewers can make decisions faster because they have the context they need. A reviewer who can see what sources influenced an answer and what policy checks were applied can focus attention on real risk rather than debating style or tone. This reduces review fatigue and reduces bottlenecks because the review process becomes more consistent. Explainability can also support exception-based oversight because the system can surface why a case was flagged, such as a sensitive topic or an unusual retrieval result. That makes escalation more efficient and less frustrating for users. Beginners should see explainability as a speed tool when designed correctly because it prevents endless back and forth and reduces rework caused by unclear system behavior. The business goal is not to avoid oversight, but to make oversight effective and quick. Explainability must also account for privacy, because a good explanation should not become a new channel for leaking sensitive information. If explanations include too much detail, they may expose personal data or restricted documents to people who should not see them. Defensible systems handle this by aligning explanations with user permissions, so people see only what they are authorized to see. They also separate operational evidence from general user-facing explanations, so investigators and auditors can access deeper detail under controlled conditions while routine users receive safer summaries. This is an important balancing act because the system must be explainable to the right people without becoming an information disclosure tool. Beginners should recognize that explainability is not the same as transparency to everyone. It is about appropriate transparency, meaning the right detail to the right audience at the right time, with access controls and logging to prevent misuse. Over time, explainability becomes more defensible when it is treated as part of change management rather than as a one-time design feature. Models are updated, prompts are refined, data sources are added, and integrations evolve, and each change can alter what explanations should show. If you cannot tie an output to a specific model version and a specific configuration, you cannot defend why the system behaved the way it did. This is why defensibility requires version awareness and evidence continuity, so the organization can compare behavior across changes and explain differences. It also means explainability should be tested as part of validation, not assumed, because a change can break the explainability features even if the model output still looks fine. Beginners should view explainability as a control that requires maintenance, ownership, and evidence, just like logging, access control, and monitoring. When explainability is maintained, it becomes a stable foundation for governance and audit alignment. To close, improving explainability so decisions are defensible to leaders and auditors means building a reliable, checkable account of how AI outputs are produced and controlled. Defensibility requires explaining both the system process and specific outputs, grounding explanations in verifiable artifacts like data sources, permissions, model versions, and policy checks. XAI is useful when it focuses on practical transparency rather than on theatrical rationales that cannot be validated. Strong explainability reduces overconfidence, supports smarter oversight, strengthens incident response, and makes audits about confirmation rather than reconstruction. It also helps leaders make informed decisions about where AI should be used and what safeguards are necessary before scaling. When explainability is designed with privacy and access boundaries in mind and maintained through change management, it becomes a durable tool for trustworthy AI operations. Task 20 is ultimately about making AI accountable, because accountable systems can be improved, defended, and trusted without relying on blind faith.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.